I have a trick question for you. When is doing the right thing not the right thing? Answer: when there are Pharisees around you. Hi, I'm Pastor Jeremy Bannister of Heights Christian Church, and we're going through the Bible in 5 years period of time. And if you'd like to go through the Word of God with us, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, to click the bell for notifications, and we're going to read just a little bit of the scriptures together. And through that, we're going to pull one thing from it to help us be more like Jesus. And so this whole idea of Pharisee, what it means to be a Pharisee, if you've ever heard that term before, it's really through encounters like we're going to read about today as we continue our study in Mark. So let's take a look at it and find out why Pharisees are called Pharisees, right? So let's take a look. One Sabbath, he, Jesus, was going through the grain fields. And as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. And the Pharisees were saying to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did? When he was in need and was hungry, and he and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God in the time of Abiathar the high priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat, and also gave it to those who were with him. And he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." Again, he entered the synagogue, and a man was there with a withered hand. And they watched Jesus to see whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, so they might accuse him. And he said to the man with the withered hand, "Come here." And he said to him, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to kill?" But they were silent. And he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart. And he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the sea, and a great crowd followed from Galilee and Judea and Jerusalem and Idumea, and from beyond the Jordan, and from around Tyre and Sidon. When the great crowd heard all that he was doing, they came to him, and he told his disciples to have a boat ready for him because of the crowd, lest they crush him. For he had healed many, so that all who had diseases pressed around him to touch him. And wherever the unclean spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." And he strictly ordered them not to make him known. And so we see in this passage from chapter 2 to chapter 3, as we transition, that there's these confrontations that he begins to have with the Pharisees. And these confrontations are not based upon any real wrongdoing. They're based upon rules that have been created to actually subvert what the Word of God actually says. Rest for people did not mean that they couldn't cook for themselves or get food for themselves or anything like that. Rest for the people was a time of downtime, that they weren't supposed to work in a traditional sense. Like, I'm not going to go to work and work my fields and do all this other stuff, that I would normally do the other 6 days of the week, to go off and earn money and to do these things. I'm setting this time aside so that I might honor God with the way that I'm living. But walking through a field and picking heads of grain and eating because you're hungry, this isn't the type of work that they're talking about in the law. But what had happened was the Pharisees had created all of these rules to define work differently than the Word of God actually defined it. And so they get into these confrontations with Jesus concerning the grain that was there. And of course, Jesus then talks about, didn't you hear what happened with David? He wasn't accused of sin when he ate the bread of the presence, which is only lawful for the priest to do. They were exchanging out the bread. And so that's what had happened. And so with the man with the withered hand, it's like they're following Jesus just to find something wrong with him, right? And so he looks around, he says, is it lawful for a man to heal, to do good on the Sabbath, right? And here's the funny thing. So when he heals him on the Sabbath, this is considered, quote unquote, work. He's done something that is good for somebody else. He's freed them of their disease and their illness. And the great crowds would have the same thing that would happen to him. But because it was done on the Sabbath, they were more concerned about the Sabbath ordinance and the Sabbath observance that wasn't necessarily biblical in the ideas that they were carrying on, but their redefinition of those terms. And they've prided themselves on that definition so much they actually subverted what the Word of God actually says. And so here's the funny thing. They didn't want them to do traditional work, but the idea of helping somebody on the Sabbath was not forbidden. And the idea that you would do something for somebody in a loving way on the Sabbath was not forbidden. And here they are being called on it by Jesus. So Jesus does something good and is told that what he is doing is wrong. And of course, we know that that's not true, for Jesus never sinned. And so here what we have is the understanding of the law made more perfect by Jesus, who tells us that the Sabbath was made for man, not the other way around. That the rest that we get is ultimately for us, and the command to worship God ultimately is for us. Honestly. And us doing those things will be a blessing for us, but not in a legalistic way that we can never do anything that would disrupt that pattern of life. Because heaven knows, I don't know about you, my life gets disrupted all the time, and I end up not doing the things I think I want to do, even honoring things to God that I want to do, because my days get disrupted. Those types of things are not a dishonoring to God. And we need not hold on to that legalistic approach that the Pharisees have concerning these things, but rather the law of liberty that allows us to do the good things God designed the Sabbath to be for. The Sabbath is for man, for rest and for worship. So make your food, go out and help somebody else, and do it with a good conscience. You are not breaking the Sabbath. Pray that helps you today, not just on the day that might be a day of rest and worship for you, but every day that you can rest and worship by doing the things that God would want you to do. God bless you, and we will talk with you again tomorrow.